Picture the Leman Russ Battle Tank in the glowing hololiths of the Adeptus era. It is a glorious behemoth, a roaring symbol of the Emperor's indomitable might, crushing the enemies of mankind beneath its blessed treads. The propaganda vids show noble commanders striking heroic poses from the cupola, bathed in the light of distant suns. But those vids are a lie, a carefully manufactured delusion designed to feed the endless meat grinder of the Astra Militarum. Now, imagine the reality. Strip away the glorious orchestral anthems and the crisp uniforms. Step inside the cold, scarred hole, and the illusion shatters instantly. You are not a noble knight riding a mechanical steed. You are a condemned soul, sealed inside a suffocating, grinding iron coffin. The Leman Russ is not designed for human comfort. It is a brutally efficient killing machine where the human crew is entirely secondary to the massive cannons they serve. Before the engine even roars to life, the stench hits you. It is a thick, nauseating miasma of burning promethium, ancient machine lubricants, stale sweat, and the dried blood of the crews who died in these exact seats before you. There is no advanced ventilation here. You breathe what the machine breathes. You suffocate in the dark, cramped belly of a beast that cares nothing for your survival. Today, we are tearing away the armor plating to look inside. We will explore the horrifying, claustrophobic, and mind-breaking reality of the men and women who serve in the Imperial Leman Russ. From the deafening roar that shatters eardrums to the creeping terror of burning alive in the dark. This is the true cost of Imperial armored warfare. If you are ready to face the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, subscribe and let us descend into the Iron Tomb. The moment the heavy adamantium hatch clangs shut above you, the physical torment begins. The interior of a Leman Russ is an assault on the senses, a brutal test of human endurance before the enemy even fires a shot. The most immediate, overwhelming sensation is the heat. Sitting mere feet away from a roaring, inadequately shielded multi-fuel engine block, the crew compartment rapidly turns into an industrial oven. Temperatures can easily soar to roasting levels, turning the air thick and heavy. You do not simply sweat in a Leman Russ, you bake. The heavy flak armor and standard issue fatigues cling to the skin, soaked through within minutes. Dehydration is a constant, gnawing predator. Water rations are strictly enforced, but they are never enough. Crew members often find themselves drinking tepid, metallic-tasting water just to stave off delirium, their lips cracked and bleeding in the blistering, stagnant air of the cabin. But the heat is only the beginning. Then comes the noise. When the massive engine engages, it does not purr. It violently shakes the entire hull. It is a deafening, continuous mechanical scream that vibrates through the floor grates and directly into your bones. Standard issue Vox speeds and air protection do little to muffle the sheer physical force of the sound. Within months of service, partial deafness is not just common. It is practically a guarantee. And that is just the idling engine. Consider what happens when the tank moves. The Leman Russ has no advanced suspension designed for passenger comfort. Every crater, every crushed wall, every pile of human remains the heavy tracks grind over sends a jarring shockwave through the cabin. The interior is jagged with exposed bolts, sharp ammunition racks, and unshielded machinery. Merely traversing a ruined hive city will leave a crew covered in deep bruises, lacerations, and fractured ribs. When the main battle cannon fires, the reality shifts from painful to agonizing. The overpressure wave inside the cabin is staggering. It punches the breath from your lungs and rattles your teeth in your skull. Sponson gunners and loaders must brace themselves against the violent recoil, all while choking on the acrid, toxic cordite smoke that inevitably bleeds back into the crew compartment after every single discharge. Through all of this, you are effectively blind. The outside world is reduced to flickering. Poor quality picked screens and narrow vision slits. The interior is bathed only in the sickly red glow of tactical lumen strips and the erratic sparking of overburdened cogitators. You are trapped in a vibrating, roaring, sweltering steel box, surrounded by the smell of your own slow decay, completely divorced from the battlefield you are supposed to be dominating. This physical degradation is deliberate. To the Adeptus Mechanicus who designed these machines, adding creature comforts like climate control or acoustic dampening would be a waste of precious resources and an insult to the machine spirit. The tank is perfect, the flesh is weak. Therefore, the flesh must endure. The crew is expected to bleed, sweat, and suffer to fuel the tank's wrath. Your body is just another consumable component, slowly grinding itself down to keep the tracks moving. The physical degradation is only the prelude. Inside the Leman Russ, the mind shatters long before the adamantium armor cracks. When you seal 5 human beings inside a sweltering, deafening metal box, you create a psychological pressure cooker. There is no privacy, no retreat, and absolutely no escape from the creeping madness. You are forced into an unnatural, parasitic relationship with both the machine and the other condemned soul sharing your iron coffin. In the belly of the beast, individuality is erased. You become a single, traumatized organism. You learn the ragged breathing patterns of your crewmates over the crackling vox. You smell their fear sweat. You hear their muttered prayers and terrified whimpers. Their panic becomes your panic. If one man breaks, the fragile psychological ecosystem of the tank collapses, dooming you all to a violent, fiery death. Consider the tank commander. Perched in the cramped cupola, they possess the illusion of control, but bear a crushing burden of responsibility. Through flickering auspex screens and narrow periscopes, they observe the slaughter outside. They must process a chaotic flood of tactical data, knowing that a single miscalculated order, a delayed turn, or a misidentified target will result in the immediate vaporization of their entire crew. The commander's existence is deeply paranoid. They must project unwavering authority and absolute faith in the Emperor, even as their own sanity frays. If a crew member succumbs to hysteria, the commander must act swiftly. It is a terrifying reality that many commanders are forced to draw their sidearms to execute a panicking loader or driver, silencing the hysteria to appease the commissariat and the tank's belligerent machine spirit. Below the commander sits the main gunner, the executioner of the Iron Tube. They spend hours staring intensely through targeting crosshairs into a distorted, green-lit world. Their reality is reduced to coordinates, rangefinders, and the pull of the firing trigger. They erase dozens, hundreds of lives with a flick of a switch, completely disconnected from the visceral reality of the carnage they inflict. It is a profound, horrifying dissociation, but the gunner pays a heavy physical and mental toll. Every time the battle cannon fires, the massive breach slams back just inches from their face. The concussive shockwaves cause microtraumas to the brain. Over time, the constant concussions, combined with the psychological weight of automated mass murder, leave the gunner numb. They become hollowed-out shells, twitching with combat stims and half-remembered nightmares. Beside the gunner works the loader, enduring the most physically demanding and terrifying role. In the sweltering, pitching cabin, they must constantly heave massive, dangerously unstable high-explosive shells into the cannon's breech. There is no room for error. One slip of a sweaty palm, one fumble as the tank violently lurches over a trench, and the ordnance could detonate prematurely, instantly turning the crew into ash. The loader's existence is a frantic, endless rhythm of heavy lifting and desperate survival. Their muscles tear, their hands bleed, and their knuckles are permanently scarred by the grinding autoloader mechanisms. Their mind is eventually reduced to pure, primal, instinctive, desperate drive to feed the hungry gun before the enemy can fire back. The Imperium treats them not as a man, but as a fleshy, expendable loading mechanism. This relentless cycle of brutal violence, extreme confinement, and mechanical servitude strips away the human soul. The Leman Russ does not simply consume vast quantities of promethium fuel and high-explosive ammunition. It consumes the humanity, the sanity, and the very essence of the men and women chained to its interior. It is an altar of war where human minds are sacrificed. If you find yourself fascinated by the brutal reality of the grim darkness of the far future, and want to uncover more horrifying truths hidden within the 41st millennium, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your continued support fuels our endless journey into the darkest, most terrifying corners of the Imperium of Man. Down in the isolated low hole, practically blind to the world, sits the driver. They are separated from the rest of the crew, peering through a narrow, heavily armored vision slit that offers almost zero situational awareness. They must steer a lumbering, 60-ton behemoth through a chaotic sea of artillery fire, shattered masonry, and screaming infantry, relying almost entirely on the vox orders of the commander. The psychological torment of the driver is unique and deeply traumatizing. They cannot see the battlefield, but they feel everything. They feel the sickening, heavy thump as the wide adamantium tracks crush human bodies, both enemy combatants and fallen Imperial guardsmen. The commander screams to push forward, and the driver must obey, turning a blind eye to the gore clogging the treads. The guilt is a slow-acting poison. Finally, there are the sponson gunners, if the tank is equipped with them. Wedged into tiny, jutting metal blisters on the sides of the hull, they have the worst survival rate of any crew. They are entirely isolated, cramped in spaces so tight they can barely rotate their shoulders. If the tank is outflanked, they are the first to die, cooked alive instantly by incoming anti-armor plasma fire. Combine these shattered psyches, and you cultivate a petri dish for a profound madness. Severe claustrophobia violently clashes with battlefield post-traumatic stress. You are trapped in a claustrophobic metal box, utterly terrified of the horrors waiting in the outside world, yet simultaneously desperate to claw your way out of the suffocating, burning interior. The mind simply cannot reconcile this paradox, and it fractures. The true horror reveals itself when the fighting finally stops. The silence of the idling engine is worse than the roar of the cannons. The exhausted crew is left in the pitch dark, twitching at every metallic creak, waiting for the armor to be breached. They sleep in fitful shifts, haunted by the ghosts of the enemies they crushed and the friends they lost, forever trapped in their shared iron tomb. The true nightmare of the armored crew does not come from the deafening roar of combat. It comes when the engine abruptly dies. A mobility kill on a Leman Russ is a definitive death sentence. Suddenly, the 60-ton behemoth ceases to be a formidable weapon of war and transforms instantly into a static iron tube. The grinding tracks halt, the deafening vibration stops, and an eerie, suffocating silence floods the sweltering crew compartment. In that profound, terrifying silence, the crew realizes they're entirely paralyzed. The thick ceramite plating, once their ultimate shield, is now the impenetrable wall of their prison. Without engine power, the heavy turret cannot turn. The autoloaders jam, and the internal air scrubbers slowly spin down to a halt. The temperature shifts, the sickly red emergency lumens flicker, and the reality of their doom begins to crystallize in the darkness. Now, imagine the worst-case scenario. You are stalled on a dead world, and the Auspex screen suddenly goes completely dark. But it is not a malfunction. It is a biological shadow, a tyrannid swarm. You sit in absolute, pitch-black silence, holding your breath, waiting. Then, you hear it. It starts as a faint, rhythmic tapping against the outer hull, a sickening, insectoid clicking that multiplies by the thousands. The scratching intensifies, It is the sound of razor-sharp bioweaponry and acidic claws systematically testing the structural integrity of your tank. You realize with dawning horror that you are no longer a soldier of the Emperor. You are canned meat. The Leman Russ is just a shell, and the alien swarm is patiently, meticulously peeling it open to feast on the soft, terrified flesh huddled inside. The pressure seals begin to hiss, and noxious, spore-choked fog bleeds through the micro-fractures in the armor. You hear the deafening sound of metal tearing, followed by an inhuman, hungry shriek. The iron coffin has been breached. In that final, suffocating moment in the dark, you have to make a choice. Will you empty your sidearm into the encroaching horrors, or save the final round for yourself? But the enemy tearing at the hole does not always have claws. Sometimes, the invisible enemy is the very atmosphere of the battlefield. The war zones of the 41st millennium are toxic hellscapes, saturated with radiological fallout, airborne biophages, and corrosive chemical mists. The Leman Russ is equipped with environmental seals, but in the brutal reality of sustained combat, these seals degrade, crack, and inevitably fail. When toxic gas breaches the cabin, panic is absolute. The crew violently scrambles for their rebreather masks in the cramped, pitch-black dock. But standard-issue departmentum unitorm gear is notoriously unreliable. Filter cartridges clog, air hoses crack, and soon, someone begins to choke. You are forced to listen to your crewmate violently drown in their own dissolved fluids, knowing their masks simply failed while yours miraculously held. In these moments, trapped and waiting for a rescue that the Administratum has already calculated is not worth the Promethean to execute, the human mind completely collapses. The crew is left in the dark, suffocating on poisoned air or waiting for the horrific sound of yielding armor. They are buried alive, forgotten beneath the ash of a nameless world, paying the ultimate psychological price for the Emperor's endless wars. The Administratum propaganda paints the Leman Russ as an invincible fortress of ceramite and plasteel. Young recruits are told the heavy armor is the Emperor's embrace, a holy barrier protecting them from the horrors of the galaxy. But the veteran tank crew knows the bitter, cynical truth. The thick plating is not a compassionate shield designed to keep humanity safe. It is a suffocating cage designed solely to keep them fighting. The design philosophy of the Adeptus Mechanicus is a masterclass in brutal pragmatism. The massive armor plates are angled and heavily reinforced to protect the engine block, the volatile ammunition stores, and the sacred battle cannon. The flesh trapped inside is merely a secondary consideration. You are an organic computational system, installed only because true artificial intelligence is forbidden heresy. The machine is divine. You are entirely expendable. If a superheated plasma blast penetrates the frontal hull, incinerating the driver, the hull gunner, but leaves the engine operational, the tech priests will praise the Omnissiah. They consider the tank's defensive design a flawless, holy success. This leads to a horrifying, soul-crushing realization for the surviving crew members. They are, without a doubt, the cheapest, most easily replaceable components aboard the entire 60-ton vehicle. A damaged battle cannon requires months of consecrated labor, rare materials, and complex rituals to repair. A slaughtered crew, however, can be replaced in minutes from the endless, churning masses of the Imperial Guard infantry. You are not a heroic, armored knight of the Imperium. You are disposable biological ballast, shoveled into the furnace of war to keep the Emperor's holy war machine functioning for just one more day. The sheer thickness of the armor soon becomes its own form of psychological torment. When heavy anti-tank fire strikes the hull, the kinetic energy does not simply vanish. It reverberates violently inwards. The crew is trapped inside a massive iron bell that is constantly being struck by explosive hammers. Even non-penetrating hits cause internal spalling, sending lethal, jagged shards of metal tearing through the confined crew compartment. The ultimate irony of this false shield is how effectively it seals your doom. The very armor meant to deflect Xeno's weaponry becomes an inescapable furnace when the tank is crippled. The heavy egress hatches, built to withstand artillery strikes, are nearly impossible to push open manually if the hydraulic mechanisms fail. You are locked inside a burning, impenetrable vault, realizing the Emperor's protection was nothing but a bureaucratic lie. When the human mind is pushed past the breaking point in the sweltering dark, rationality dies. The crew cannot survive on logic or imperial decrees alone. They need something deeper, something visceral to cling to when the armor rings with the impact of Xeno's artillery. In the claustrophobic belly of the Leman Russ, survival breeds a strange, desperate fanaticism. The official cult mechanicus dogma morphs into localized, morbid rituals of the damned. Every crew knows the tank is alive. They do not just operate the Leman Russ, they appease it. The machine spirit of a heavily scarred battle tank is notoriously belligerent, demanding respect and blood in equal measure. The commander whispers soothing litanies to the command console, coaxing the cogitators to lock onto targets. The driver affectionately names the stubborn gear levers, believing that a harsh word will cause the transmission to lock up during a retreat. Oil and promethium are treated with holy reverence, but so is human blood. It is a common, unspoken superstition among seasoned crews that a pristine tank is a cursed tank. A new Leman Russ straight from the forged world must be baptized. Loaders will intentionally cut their palms on the jagged autoloader mechanisms, allowing a few drops of their own blood to mingle with the sacred machine oils, binding their mortal souls to the Iron Beast. But the most disturbing rituals involve the dead. The life expectancy of a crewman is brutally short, and the cramped cabin is a revolving door of slaughtered operators. When a gunner is vaporized by penetrating it, or a driver bleeds out over the controls, their remains are not always entirely scrubbed away. The surviving crew claims fragments of their fallen comrades to forge macabre talismans of protection against the horrors outside. It is a horrifying reality that many veteran Leman Russ interiors are decorated with human bone. Small, blackened finger joints or shattered ribs are carefully hollowed out, etched with prayers to the God Emperor, and hung from the primary periscopes or the main gun breech. These grim trinkets sway and rattle with every violent lurch of the tank. The crew believes these bone charms carry the vengeful spirits of their predecessors, warding off armor-piercing shells. To an outsider, or a rigid commissar, these fetishes look like borderline heresy. But to the men and women locked in the iron coffin, these bone charms are the only tangible proof that their suffering matters. The charms represent a continuous lineage of shared torment. Touching the polished bone of a dead gunner before squeezing the firing trigger is an anchor. It grounds their shattered psyche in the brutal reality of their confined existence. As the sensory deprivation and exhaustion set in, the line between superstition and hallucination blurs. During the agonizing, pitch-black silence of a cold night, crews report hearing the voices of those dead comrades echoing through the voxcasters. They hear phantom coughing from the empty sponson seats. Rather than succumbing to terror, the veterans find comfort in these auditory ghosts. They believe the tank retains the souls of everyone who died within its steel walls. Ultimately, these rituals highlight the profound tragedy of the armored regiments, stripped of their humanity, denied basic comfort, and constantly facing a horrific, fiery death. The crew must invent their own localized religion just to function. They worship the very cage that imprisons them. They pray to the engine that deafens them, and they seek comfort in the mangled remains of the friends they could not save. In the end, the ritualistic behavior signifies the final stage of their psychological assimilation. They stop viewing themselves as soldiers operating a vehicle. Through blood, bone, and whispered litanies, they merge with the machine. They become an organic extension of the firing mechanisms and the heavy treads. The flesh and the metal are wedded in a grotesque marriage of violence, bound together by desperation, dogma, and the suffocating dark. To survive the relentless horror of the Leman Russ, the human mind must fundamentally change. You cannot endure the suffocating heat, the deafening noise, and the constant proximity to death while holding onto your humanity. The Imperium does not just demand your service. It demands your complete psychological surrender. The crew must forget the feeling of fresh air, the concept of silence, and the value of their own individual lives. The Adeptus Mechanicus often preaches that the flesh is weak, yet they rely on it because it is endlessly abundant. Inside the iron coffin, you realize the horrific truth of this dogma. You are no longer a citizen of the Imperium or a soldier with a name. You are reduced to a biological cog in a massive, grinding meat grinder. Your hands are merely fleshy extensions of the autoloader. Your eyes are just organic lenses for the targeting cogitators. When your identity erodes, so does your capacity for human empathy. The constant, suffocating trauma effectively cauterizes the soul. You watch a brother-in-arms get vaporized in the side sponson, and your only coherent thought is how his terrified screaming briefly interrupted the tactical vox chatter. You feel the tracks grind over the crushed bodies of allied infantrymen, and you only care that their shattered armor might jam the treads. The machine's cold brutality becomes your own. This is the ultimate, sickening paradox of Imperial armored warfare. To effectively operate the Emperor's war machine, you must systematically strip away the very humanity the Emperor ostensibly protects. The veteran tank crew becomes as hollow, relentless, and unfeeling as the adamantium shell that surrounds them. They transform into mechanized monsters wearing human skin, fueled entirely by a bleak, nihilistic acceptance that they will never leave the tank alive. Compare this brutal existence to the revered space marine dreadnoughts. While Astartes entombed in combat, walkers are worshipped as ancient, holy heroes. The guardsman sealed in a Leman Russ is nothing more than raw, disposable material. There is no glory in your iron tomb, and there are no sacred chants sung in your honor. You exist entirely within the grim mathematics of Imperial attrition. Your suffering is simply the necessary friction required to keep the cogs of war turning. Ultimately, there is no honorable discharge from this service, and there is no psychological therapy for a mind permanently molded by the Leman Russ. Even if, by some miraculous twist of fate, a crew member survives their tour of duty, they are fundamentally ruined. They can never return to civilian life. The silence of a peaceful world would deafen them. The open sky would crush them. They are forever bound to the grinding treads. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is no retirement plan for a Leman Russ crew. The cold mathematics of the Astra Militarum dictate only one inevitable conclusion. Your tour of duty ends when the iron coffin is finally reached. You will not die in a pristine Medicaid bed surrounded by mourning loved ones. You will die on a nameless, ash-choked world, screaming in the dark as superheated plasma turns the cramped crew compartment into a localized sun. When the thick smoke clears and the front line inevitably moves on, there will be no solemn burial. The Adeptus Mechanicus will arrive only to salvage the holy wreckage. Tech priests will bless the scorched adamantium and casually hose out the carbonized remains of you and your crewmates. Your names will be erased from the Departmentum Unitorum ledgers, replaced instantly by another squad of terrified conscripts. The sacred machine is cleansed, the blood is scrubbed away, and the tank rolls forward into the next massacre. This is the suffocating, horrifying reality of the Imperial tank crew. You are born in the mud, you live in the deafening dark, and you burn alive for a god emperor who will never know your name. If you survived this journey into the belly of the beast, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below telling us which grimdark nightmare you want us to decode next. Until then, remember, the Emperor protects, but the armor does not.